In this episode, we're going to install the valve springs on the ported heads that we just got back from GPI and get them ready to install on this 5.3 short block. We're going to get this thing ready to go back in the truck. For you guys that haven't caught up on the last episode, we're working on a 2015 Chevy Silverado. We've put in a set of forged BTR drop-in pistons. We sent the heads down to GPI and got them CNC ported. We're installing a stage 3 BTR cam, the new Gen 5 truck intake from BTR, along with their cold air intake, a Circle D stall converter, and a set of long tube headers and full exhaust. Now we've got one of the cylinder heads laid out. We've got all our components to put the springs and the seals in. We did have a couple bad valves in these cylinder heads, and GPI replaced those for us. Took care of us on that. Gave us the old valves back so we can see them. Now I made a TikTok video a while back on a set of CNC ported cylinder heads on an LT4 having holes in the runners where the rocker arm bolt is embossed. I started catching a lot of flack on that video saying how that was essentially an industry standard. I want to touch base back on that because I was told when I got a set of heads ported from GPI they were going to be like that. Ironically, we have a set of cylinder heads here ported by GPI that don't have any holes in the intake runners. Now on that LT4 particularly, the holes in the intake runners, you could tell it wasn't from when the head was ported itself. It was from the head being over ported to the point of the wall thickness being so thin that when they didn't clean out the rocker arm bolt holes and they hydrolocked that bolt, it blew it out into the runner. But I just want to stress the fact that this set of cylinder heads just come back from GPI. They're CNC ported and they do not have any holes in the runners. Nor here or there. We've got a set here. They don't have any holes in the runners. So we're ready to rock. We're good to go. We're going to get these things installed, get these heads put on the engine, and get this thing ready to go back in the truck. Let's dive into it. All right. So when it comes time to put your springs on your heads, obviously you're probably still going to have your stock springs on your heads unless you sent your heads off and they send them back like this. Now the reason we are installing the springs here is we did not pay them extra to put the new springs on, and we were waiting on the new springs to come in when we sent the heads off. So first you're going to start with installing your seals. Beans, we're using a stock replacement style 560 Beehive spring. We've got top hat seals. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to pop it over the valve, push it down as far as you can, make sure it's not on there crooked. We've got a 13mm socket, fits over the front of that seal just right, and then we're just going to lightly tap it down until you hear the sound of the hits change like that. That means you know it's fully seated. So now we're going to put all 8 of these bad boys on here. All right, once you've got all your seals installed, you're going to take a spring and a retainer and get it set up for your spring compressor. Now they have different styles of spring compressors. I'm not fond of the ones that rely on the threads inside the rocker arm bolts and like to clamp down 2 springs at once. They've got several different styles out now, though. We use the handy dandy old C-clamp style from Harbor Freight. It's like $50 or so. We're going to get it locked in, and then we're going to bring the spring down so we've got room to get our locks on. Now, a little pro tip when you're dealing with your locks is they get you some kind of grease of some sort. Get you a little dab of that on a small pocket screwdriver, and that will make your locks a little sticky. So when you put them on here, they don't want to fight you and try to fall. They'll actually stay on the end of the valve. Just got to get them in place to where they'll hold. There we go. Now you can use a magnet for this too, but then you've got to fight the resistance of the magnet trying to hang on to the locks when you want it to release. And then from there we're just going to back our C-clamp tool off. Just like that. Wipe the grease off the end of the valve. That's the seal and spring installed right there. Now we just got to do that 7 more times and we're ready to slide a camshaft in this bad boy. All right, guys, so we got the valve springs on the heads. We're about to slide the camshaft in. We do have to install a VVT limiter inside the cam phaser. We're going to show you guys how to do that as well. We've got his trunnion upgrade done. His lifter's soaking in oil. We've got a set of DOD plugs to put in the valley and the AFM towers. We're going to show you guys how to do that. And we're going to kind of run through some of the parts as we put this thing together and show you guys what we're using and why we use it. First things first, everybody wants to know about a camshaft. So we got a stage 3 Gen 5 truck cam from BTR. That's what we're putting in this thing. It's a 540 lift on both sides, 215 intake duration with a 233 exhaust duration, and it's on a 110 LSA. Should be a pretty rowdy little camshaft, and with the converter, the intake, and the exhaust modifications that we have to go with it. Being a two-wheel drive truck, little single cab, this thing should be an absolute blast to drive, and more than likely it's going to be a handful. Before we install the camshaft itself in the motor, since we don't have a rear cover on this block, we are going to go ahead and do the VVT limiter first. We're going to have to take this thing out there, put it in the vise, and take it apart. If you're working on a VVT phaser at all, be super careful. Don't go to prying on it, pulling it apart. These things are spring loaded, and if they come apart, it comes apart at a rate of speed that can be fatal. It's very important to make sure you know what you're doing. You've at least seen one of these be taken apart a good handful of times. That way you know what to expect and to know what you're looking for. Luckily, we've always been safe about it, and we've never had an accident. God forbid it happen, but negligence can lead to very disastrous things when you're messing with these phasers. We're going to go out there and go ahead and get the 4-degree VVT limiter installed in this thing and show you guys what that's about. All right, so we've got our 4-degree VVT limiter from BTR. We've got a tool to install it. We've got a nut and bolt with a couple washers. This is just some extra assurance to make sure the phaser stays together while we're doing what we need to do. Hand ratchet to use our tool here. We've got a Torx bit and an electric ratchet. Now essentially the concept is we're going to put the nut and bolt and the washers through here. We're going to clamp this thing down in the vise. So one of the screws, one of these Torx screws holding in the back of the phaser here has a line next to it. We're going to loosen that one up, but we're not going to take it out all the way. And that's going to allow us to pivot this around. Now the whole thing here is we're going to put our nut and bolt in. We're going to take the tension off the spring, insert this lock on the back side here with this tool, and that's what's going to hold the tension off the spring so we can actually take this thing apart. Now, that spring I was talking about is right here. You can see where it's caught on a pin, and that's where it's held on tension. This thing's essentially just a few pieces pushed together. So we're going to start by putting our nut and bolt in. Just something to hold it together. It ain't got to be tight. We're just going to get it down by hand. Then we're going to clamp this in the vise. Alright, so this thing doesn't look any different on the outside, but without that 4-degree limiter, we'd be in trouble. So we got that thing put in there. Alright, so we're back in here. We're about to slide the camshaft in this thing, get it together. We've got our lifters pre-soaked. We've got our rocker arms pre-soaked. We've got the phaser together with the limiter installed. We've got our cam plate laid out. We've got our DOD plugs laid out. We've got a new cam bolt, new lifter trays. Let's get to it. I'm going to use the old bolt to help me get the cam in, because this is a single bolt cam and I don't have a tool for that. So of course we're using the driven HVL assembly lube. This thing does have an increase on the fuel lobe as well. Alright, so anytime you pull one of these bolts out of a cam phaser, it needs to be replaced. That's per GM. Even if they didn't recommend it, I recommend it because of the orifices in this thing. High mileage and poor oil change intervals can lead to this thing being stopped up and not working properly. So always replace those. They're not that expensive. It's a good, cheap peace of mind. So we're going to throw that one in the trash. We've got a new one. We want to give a quick shout out to O'Reilly's, our #1 YouTube sponsor. They came through clutch. We did have a small holdup on this thing. We forgot to order a timing chain tensioner for this job. So we called O'Reilly's. They got us one out. They rushed around. They went across town, and then they brought us one out. So we did get that. We've got that to put on, and now we can proceed with getting this thing in time, getting the timing set, the cam phaser, and all that on it, and move on to getting these GPI heads bolted down to this thing. So we're going to start with the timing set and the chain tensioner, and then we're going to get the lifters slid in and get our DOD plugs in, show you guys how to cam a L83 5.3. All right, so when you're timing one of these, it's not like an LS, it doesn't have a dot down here. Instead, it has an arrow. One way you can always identify that is look at this, and remember you want the dowel pin on the camshaft to be at 3 o'clock. So with that notch for the dowel pin at 3 o'clock, that puts this arrow at 6 o'clock. So that's how we're going on with it. Now with this motor being low mileage, considered low mileage for what we're normally putting the camshaft in. We are reusing this timing chain, but we did replace the tensioner. All right, so we lift our pin in, holding the tension on the tensioner. That way we had some slack in our chain. Now we're going to pull this out, and it's going to release it against the chain. Just like that. All right, guys, so we got our lifters in. We got the oil pump on this thing. We got the timing set in. We've got everything in the short block buttoned up. We've got his DOD plugs in the top of it and the AFM towers. Next, we're going to be getting his cylinder heads ready to put on. Now, we do have a set of stock L83 BTR head gaskets. We've got a stock head bolt kit from BTR. We still got to get our dowel pins in the block. But we're ready to get these CNC ported heads from GPI on this thing to maximize airflow for this camshaft and really try to utilize the power gain that we can get out of it. We're about to get those things bolted on here, get some push rods in this thing, get these Trunnion upgrade put on it that Emma already installed in the rockers, and then this thing's just about ready to go in the truck from there. We still have to clean the front cover, the oil pan, the rear cover, install his seals and such, but we'll get that done and get this thing dressed out and ready to go on. Are ready to go in the truck. We also have the new BTR Gen 5 truck intake with the long runners for this truck and their new cold air intake tube as well, along with a Circle D stall converter and some long tube headers and full exhaust. So this thing should sound good, run good, look the part doing it when you pop the hood. So let's get these cylinder heads put on this thing. When we're doing a DOD delete or any kind of cam swap in a Gen 5 engine, one thing we always like to replace is the camshaft follower for the fuel pump. It's essentially like a lifter on the end, like a big lifter. It's got a roller right here on the inside. It rides on a journal on the camshaft that has 3 lobes. And it actually drives the high pressure fuel pump that bolts down on the back of the valley. And when these things start to wear to a camshaft, it's essentially just like a lifter. When you change the camshaft, it's not going to be worn to that camshaft. So we like to put a new surface on a new surface. So I'm going to pre-lube this thing and slide it in. It goes right here in the back of the block, and we're going to go ahead and bolt that down. But just a little pro tip, if you're doing a DOD deleting one of these, definitely replace that fuel pump follower. Now, one thing you're going to want to do before you put your new cylinder head and your new cylinder head bolts in is you're going to want to chase the threads. When you pull this old cylinder heads off, it's common for coolant and oil to get down in the bottom run of head bolts. If you're not careful, you can hydrolock a bolt in a block and crack an aluminum block. It's very common, happens more often than it should. So what we do to prevent that is, first off, we'll blow the holes out with the air wand, compressed air, and then we'll go through with an old head bolt and by hand or with an electric ratchet and slow speed, we will run that old bolt down and bring it back through nice and smooth, quick and easy like it should. Now, you don't want to use one of your new head bolts because the new head bolts come with Loctite, and once the first time you run that thing through and pull it back out, all your Loctite's going to be gone. Or they make a tool to clean threads and chase the threads in an engine block. Like I said, if you're rolling on a budget and don't have a bunch of tools or a large budget to buy tools, then you can use a head bolt. It'll work the same. Another little pro tip for you, if you're installing a set of head gaskets on an LS or an LT, they're all labeled front, and this needs to go to the front of the engine. Now, one way you can double check and make sure you did this right if you already put your heads on is this little tab right here. This tab's going to stick out, and it'll either be closer to the front of the engine, or if the head gasket's on wrong, it'll be closer to the back of the engine. So always make sure front to the front, and then it'll tell you the size of the gasket on the other side. All right, so we got these heads from GPI. These were CNC ported. They did a fantastic job. We don't have any like blowouts in the intake runners or anything like that. So we did install a set of springs and seals. You guys saw that. So now we're about to get these things put on. We're going to start with the driver's side, which does have a very particular and fancy head bolt for the front inside. If you've never seen one, this is what it looks like. And it does take a 13mm Allen style socket to get this thing in and torque down properly. We've got our head bolts laid out here. We're just going to put a drop of oil underneath the head of the bolt. Start dropping these things in here. All right, guys, so that wraps up the top end assembly in this L83 5.3. We filled this thing full of BTR goodies, and we're getting ready to put it back in the truck now and top it off with even more BTR goodies. We're not stopping there. We're also putting a set of stainless long tube headers on and a little bit of eye candy on top. We're going to save that for next episode, though. We do want to give a huge shout out to our main YouTube sponsor, O'Reilly Auto Parts. They're always coming in clutch, bringing us what we need in the last minute, making sure that we stay stocked up on fluids and the various things that we need here at the shop. So thank you, O'Reilly's Auto Parts of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and the Northeast Arkansas region. We greatly appreciate you guys. They are our exclusive local parts retailer. We don't go to AutoZone. We don't go to Advanced. We are O'Reilly's exclusive here at 727. Also want to give a shout out to BTR for making some of the best quality parts that we can and putting everything that they make through vigorous testing and making sure that it's good for the applications that we use, giving us a great part selection, constantly coming out with new products and R&D-ing the hell out of them to make sure they're going to meet the requirements for the applications that we want to put them on. So if you need any modern LS, LT performance parts, make sure to head over to BTR or send us an email. We are direct dealers for BTR. So thank you to everybody, Paul and Kyle and Brian himself, everybody over at Brian Tilley Racing. And then lastly, we want to thank GPI, Gwatney Performance and Innovation down in Jacksonville, Arkansas. Ryan Stevens and the guys over there are top notch when it comes to the LT platforms, also with the LS stuff. But they've really transitioned into the LT platform and the Gen 5 stuff. And we appreciate them knocking out the port job on these heads and getting that done for us and shipping them back to us. We're excited to see how they perform on this thing. Just all in all, how this thing, it runs out the door, you know. Not only is it going to pick up a good modern power gain in the low end and the torque curve, it should also see really good gains on the higher end of the RPM range. We appreciate you guys watching. Remember to drop us a comment. If you have any questions or anything, let us know. You can send us an email. You can reach us at the Contact Us page on our website. We also sell full DOD and cam kits. So just let us know what you need. We'll help out as much as we can. Make sure to head over to Facebook and TikTok and follow us on there at 727 Motorsports. But that's going to sum it up for this one. And the next one, we'll get it back in the truck and get this thing fired up. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to subscribe, and y'all have a good one.